Jeff Dodds, please. CMO, new CMO of Virgin Media. Please come up.
Hi, everyone. I think the tank top was a wrong call. What do you reckon? I'll be honest, I forgot I was doing this tonight when I got out of bed this morning. It was very early, and I'm looking around the room and thinking probably would have gone for something else if I'd have thought about it. So there's a couple of bits of housekeeping, I should say. Normally, Thursday nights for me are entirely assigned to writing great recommendations for myself on LinkedIn. So this is different for me. I've spotted from the list, I have 3 previous account directors from agencies in the room who will probably know I've made up most of the stuff I'm about to tell you. So if they could at least keep quiet till I leave, that would be fantastic. Mark wrote down 4 things that he thought were meaningful when Ben was speaking, so I'm up on this stage till he's got 5 down there, so I could be about 25 minutes if it's going badly. So I'm conscious, when I was asked to talk about briefing, that I did a session for Promax. Do any of you know Promax? The big creative event that they use for TV industries. About 4 years ago, I went and spoke about the modern brief. So a very similar event in terms of kind of the theme to this one. And when I was asked to do this, I went back and dug out the presentation, I read through it. And in reading it, I realized that actually I would disagree today with almost everything I said 4 years ago. So I tried to work out why that was, and I thought it was probably a combination of 3 things. The first being that, times have moved on. The industry is a little bit different today than it was 4 years ago. But I don't think it's that different, actually, when I think about it. I've moved on a bit. So I think a bit differently now than I did 4 years ago. But actually, I think fundamentally the thing that changed the most is the relationship I have with the agency I work with today versus the one I had 4 years ago. And it's that relationship with the agency that's defined the way that we engage in the briefing process. So I think before I talk about the 2 or 3 things that I think are specific to briefing, I should probably talk a bit about the relationship with the agency and what's changed to give you a little bit of context. So being a client, and only ever being a client, clients talk a lot, and I've done it myself, about partnership relationships between agency and client. And we talk about, and actually when I've used it in the past, I think there's an intellectual kind of partnership that we talk about, which is around basically you have a PRF and we invite you to the Christmas dinner, that kind of partnership, versus that emotional partnership that comes when you take an agency and you plant them in the middle of your business, as Ben was talking about, and vice versa. The client goes and sits in the middle of the agency, and you both acknowledge that your businesses, you're trying to make a profit, you're trying to do good things, and actually you're doing the same thing. Not that one of you is really important, you're a client, and the agency is there to support you. And I think when I look at, and they're in the room, so they're getting platitudes here, but when I think about the relationship we have with particularly our advertising agency today, but actually it's all agencies, and that's BBH, who we use today, we have a genuine partnership relationship. And that has fundamentally changed the briefing process for us. So let me give you a couple of little examples. So in the course of the last year, I've been in the agency's business with their CEO looking at how they assess how they're going to grow their own business. So what bets are they going to make? And I sit there and feel like I'm contributing to their organisation. If I think of our media agency, I've gone and pitched with them for new business. And when they've won the business, I've felt genuinely amazing about the fact that they've won the business. And vice versa, I know that if I look at the CEOs and kind of the head of strategy and head of planning in the agencies we use, they're in my business every week. I know they feel great when our share price goes up. And I know they go to bed worrying about the problems in our business at the same way that I do. So that has fundamentally shaped the briefing process and the relationship I have. And I'll give you an example. So in our business, we have a meeting that happens every week, and it's called, rather unsexily, Front of Dog. And that meeting is it's the trading board meeting for our organisation. So we're a pretty big, pretty complex, pretty complicated business. And in that meeting, we will talk about the immediate stuff that's not working. So what actions do we have to take because we've got challenges? Either the numbers aren't coming in, the profits now are not where we want it to be, the margins aren't right, retention is a challenge for us. Our competitors have launched something we didn't think they were going to. It's a pretty hard, sticky meeting. Now, the head of strategy for BBH, who works in our account, sits in that meeting. And he takes it all in. He scratches his head a lot. He sighs a lot. He takes it all in and he goes. And something that comes out of that I think is fundamentally important is what I would call a briefing from the inside. So I know every week that he walks into the business and he says, you know what, there's some challenges that are going on in Virgin Media and we need to look at it. So you guys need to help me look at it and I'm going to give you what I would call a working brief. There's nothing formal about it. No pens, no paper, no one signed it off. You know, it's a brief that he's taking on the fly from an operational meeting in our business, and he's taking it back to the agency, and he's got other clever people thinking about it. And that, for me, versus when I think back 4 years ago, in the role I was playing, at the organisation I was with the agencies I was working with, is a massive change. Because that's a big, big shift in trust, I think, in a client side with the agency around how close you want those people to your business. Now, of course, fundamentally, the reason I go and work with BBH and I'll happily go out with a media company and pitch is because I know that the little bit of time I give to them in partnership, I get back with much smarter, you know, higher volumes of people working in agencies that are going to be thinking about my problems when they go back to the office. And it's a massive, massive change in our organisation. So I think that's one thing I would pick up, and maybe I'll summarise it later, but briefing on the inside, not a formal briefing process, get people closer to the way we work, get them thinking and obsessing about our problems, and you kind of get this ongoing, rolling briefing process. The second thing I think I'll talk about is really never let the client write the brief. And of course, that's tradition, isn't it? And that's how it works. You tend to have a fairly junior campaign manager in the organisation writing the brief, passed in front of somebody quite senior who will sign it off in 35 seconds as they quickly scan through it to make sure the keywords are in it, and then it hits the agency. And that is the way it works. Of course, for me, the challenge... So I came from Honda, so quite a while ago now in my career, I was a marketing head for Honda, and I looked after product development as part of that role. And one of the great things a Japanese car designer once told me was, you know, never let somebody who's too close to the process ask you the question or even answer the question. So if you think about designing cars, what he meant by that was if they'd designed cars around what car drivers told them, then all they'd ever really have is just a slight iteration on the car that they'd already made previously, because we tend to think in frameworks of what we have today. So slightly better stereo, iPod dock, slightly faster, slightly more miles to the gallon, and that tends to be the feedback they get. So what they did instead was, you know, they would get loads of users in and they'd test and learn, exactly as Ben was saying. They'd throw things at them that they probably thought would never go to market in order to sense the appetite. And when I look at the briefing process, if the client is writing it, and quite a junior member of the client team is writing it, they're writing it because they already know what the answer needs to be. And it becomes an exam question exercise. So they tend to write it knowing what they want you to reply, and then they judge your replies against what they thought the answer should have been in the first place. And that tends to be how it works. And I sit in the middle of it, and I've been part of it. That tends to be how it works. So I would encourage, so there's nothing wrong with more junior people writing the briefs. In fact, I would actively encourage that if lots of people are looking at it and kind of getting stuck in and challenging it. But once it hits the agency, from my perspective, you have every right to either say it's the wrong question, you should have been asking something different, to go back and actively challenge it, or even better if you can do it, to write it in partnership. So the two of you, client and agency, sitting down, writing the brief together, makes a massive difference in our organisation. And I think the final point, because I'm going to catch up on some of your time, Mark, if that's all right. I know you'll be grateful. I think the final one for me is around the length of the briefing process. Because I'm also conscious as well that and I think it's more of an agency thing than a client thing. Well, actually, they're very different, aren't they? So the client will want to write the brief in 100,000 words because they'll want to get absolutely everything you don't know about the organisation onto a piece of paper so they don't miss anything. That tends to be how it works. And of course, the agency, often the creative part of the agency, a few creatives in, I think, tonight, will try and take that and get it into a single word to distill the essence of what the client really wanted. Of course, that doesn't work either. It's a load of utter rubbish. So when I'm talking about this with people, I tend to say that John Steinbeck was my favourite author when I was growing up, and his two favourite books, Winter of Our Discontent and Mice and Men. One was 128 pages, one's 288 pages. They're both brilliant books. I love them both. They both tell the story perfectly. One didn't need to be shorter, one didn't need to be longer. So writing the brief can be 10 words if 10 words is perfect for the challenge you're setting out. And writing the brief could be 10,000 words if 10,000 words is the right amount for what you're setting out to do. But trying to take that and get it into a sentence, frankly, is a load of old rubbish, unless a sentence is the right number of words for the problem you're setting. So I think they would be my three. So I was asked to talk about three things that I've observed on the journey around the briefing process. Mine would be briefing's much better on the inside. So the closer you can get into your client's business, or as a client, the closer you can get your agency into the middle of your problems so that they start obsessing about them themselves, That's pretty smart because you're paying millions of pounds often a year for very smart people. The more they think about your problems and the closer they are to them, the better. So definitely briefing on the inside. The second one for me is actually never accept the brief on face value from the client. Either write it in partnership, write it yourself, or kind of get stuck in and at least challenge the client brief to the best of your ability. And for me, around the briefing process, I absolutely hate the standardized, this is the briefing template we use, and it's got 4 boxes and you will fill them in. Because I know that when I look at my business, the complexity of the issues and the challenges I'm trying to face into every day can never fit into a 1-page of A4 with 4 boxes, or be distilled into the essence of a single word, because that's what the creative department want it to be. In my experience, if the brief is too long for the problem, you get crap out at the end. If the brief is too short for the problem, you get crap out at the end. So write the brief around the problem. And that's much easier, actually, if the planner is sitting in your business every day, because they'll write it in their heads because they'll be thinking about it every day. My pleasure. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening.
10 minutes. Thank you.